He built his empire with power and control, but inside his mansion, silence lived like a ghost. The air in the Johnson estate always felt heavy, filled with the quiet sound of machines, the faint ticking of clocks, and footsteps that never ran. 5-year-old Ethan Johnson had not spoken a word since the day his mother died. Every morning, Anna Brooks walked through the large gates of the mansion with her cleaning gloves tucked into her apron. She was a quiet black immigrant woman who worked harder than most, never late, never loud. Her shoes made small sounds on the marble floors as she swept, mopped, and polished. She rarely looked up when people passed, and most days no one noticed her at all. The mansion itself was beautiful but cold. Silver picture frames lined the walls, but none had Ethan's mother's face anymore. Curtains stayed half closed to keep the sunlight soft, and the garden outside looked too neat to feel alive. Anna worked mostly in silence, her mind often drifting to her small apartment across town where she lived alone. Michael Johnson, Ethan's father, was a man of few words. He owned one of Boston's biggest tech companies, and everything in his life had a plan, a schedule, and a reason. But when it came to his son, he had none. He had paid every doctor, every therapist, and every specialist. They came with charts, toys, and promises. None worked. Ethan would sit still, eyes blank, lost somewhere inside his own world. That spring morning, Anna was assigned to clean the garden path behind the house. She rolled up her sleeves and began scrubbing the stone floor, her knees pressing into the ground. The smell of soap mixed with the scent of fresh grass. A light breeze brushed through her hair as she dipped her sponge into a bucket full of soap water. From the upstairs window, Ethan sat watching. He always sat there after breakfast, quiet and still, looking down at the world below like a small ghost in a big house. Anna didn't notice him at first. She hummed softly as she worked. Not a song anyone knew, just a tune that came from habit. Her hands moved slowly, careful and steady. Then, without thinking, she lifted the small plastic ring from the bucket and blew into it gently. A bubble floated out, catching the morning light. It drifted above the garden path, shining with colors before popping quietly in the air. Ethan blinked, his head tilted slightly. Anna noticed the movement, then stopped, unsure if she had done something wrong. She looked up and saw the little boy by the window, eyes wide, staring at where the bubble had been. Slowly, she smiled and dipped the ring again, blowing another one. The second bubble rose higher and floated toward the window. Ethan's tiny fingers moved against the glass. His lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time, his face wasn't blank. It was full of wonder. Inside his office, Michael watched through a camera feed. He had installed small cameras all around the house to check on his son. When he saw the scene on the screen, he leaned closer, a maid, down on her knees, blowing soap bubbles toward his son. He didn't understand it, but for some reason, he couldn't look away. Anna didn't know anyone was watching. She kept cleaning, and every few minutes she blew another bubble. Each time, Ethan followed it with his eyes. His breathing changed, his shoulders relaxed, and for a few seconds, he didn't seem lost. He seemed alive. When her shift ended, Anna picked up her bucket and went back inside. Ethan remained at the window, waiting for another bubble that never came. That night, Michael sat alone in his office. The house was dark, except for the light from his computer. He replayed the footage over and over again. Each time, he watched Ethan's face change from empty to calm, from calm to curious. It was something none of the experts had achieved. He didn't understand how a simple maid could do what 100 professionals could not. It made him angry, but deep down, it made him curious too. The next morning, Anna returned to work. Her back ached from cleaning, but she didn't complain. When she stepped outside to wash the garden again, she saw Ethan standing by the same window. She smiled. shy but kind. She lifted the ring again, blew one small bubble, and watched it float gently upward. Ethan's eyes followed it all the way until it disappeared into the sky. Then he smiled just a little. Inside the mansion, Michael stood behind the curtain of his office window, watching this time in person. The morning light touched his face as he whispered to himself, "What is she doing to him?" Hours later, when Anna returned to the kitchen, the head housekeeper scolded her. "The master wants to see you this evening," she said. Anna froze, unsure what she had done wrong. Her hands trembled as she washed the last dishes. That evening, she walked slowly toward the large office upstairs. The doors were tall, the lights bright. Michael Johnson sat behind his desk, his face calm but unreadable. "Sit," he said. Anna obeyed, her heart heavy in her chest. "I watched you this morning," he said quietly. "Through the camera." She looked down, afraid. "I was only cleaning, sir." He paused. "And blowing bubbles?" Her breath caught. "Yes, sir." The boy looked peaceful. "I didn't mean any harm." For a long moment, Michael said nothing. His hands pressed together, his eyes fixed on hers. Finally, he said, "You can go." Anna stood, nodded quickly, and left. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He walked to Ethan's room, opened the door quietly, and saw his son asleep, holding a small cup from the garden, a bit of dried soap still at the bottom. Michael sat beside him, staring at the sleeping boy. Something about it felt humbling, even holy. For the first time in months, he whispered softly, "Good night, son." Ethan stirred, his hand still clutching the cup. And far away in her small apartment, Anna lay awake too, wondering if she would still have a job in the morning, not knowing that the tiny bubbles she blew had already begun to change 3 lives forever. Morning came slowly over Boston, with soft light spilling through the tall windows of the Johnson estate. The house looked peaceful from outside, but inside, tension sat heavy in the air. Anna arrived early, her uniform neatly pressed, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed the cleaning cart through the long hallway. She had not slept much. All night she kept thinking about what Mr. Johnson might decide. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Gray, gave her a quick glance but said nothing. The silence made Anna's stomach twist. She had worked in many homes before, but none felt as cold as this one. The walls were clean, the rooms perfect, but there was no laughter, no warmth, only rules. She went straight to the garden again. Her bucket was still where she had left it the day before, half filled with dried soap. She knelt quietly, dipped her sponge, and began scrubbing the stone path. The air smelled fresh after a light rain, and for a moment she let herself breathe. Upstairs, Michael Johnson stood near his window, watching her again. He had promised himself he would not, but something about her calmness pulled at him. He didn't understand it. She was just a cleaner, yet the way she moved felt steady, almost peaceful. Ethan appeared beside him, small and quiet, holding his toy car. He looked down at the garden, saw Anna, and pressed his hand against the glass. Michael looked at his son, then back at the woman outside. He wanted to call the therapist, the doctor, anyone who could explain this strange connection, but deep down, he already knew this was different. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't science. It was something no one could measure. Anna lifted the small plastic ring again. She hesitated this time, afraid someone might be watching. But when she saw Ethan's small face by the window, she smiled softly and blew one gentle bubble. It floated upward, twisting slowly in the morning air. Ethan's eyes followed it, his fingers moving slightly, his lips parting as if trying to speak. Michael felt his heart tighten. He hadn't seen that kind of light in his son's eyes for so long. Later that day, he called Anna to his office again. She walked in carefully, hands folded. "Sit down," he said, his tone calmer than before. Anna sat, eyes fixed on the floor. Michael leaned forward. "Tell me something, Miss Brooks. What were you doing with my son?" She blinked. "Nothing, sir. I was cleaning, and I blew a bubble. He looked happy. He frowned slightly. Happy? Yes, sir, she said quietly. Sometimes children don't need words. They just need someone who doesn't rush them. Michael looked at her for a long time. He was used to people explaining things with reports and numbers, but her words were simple and heavy. "And what do you mean by that?" he asked. She met his eyes for the first time. "You can't fix silence with pressure, sir. Sometimes you have to wait for peace to come back on its own." Her words hit him like a stone. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You talk like you know what silence feels like." "I do," she said softly. "Silence is how poor people survive. We wait, we work, and we listen." The room went quiet. Michael leaned back in his chair, studying her. There was no pride in her voice, only truth. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Finally, he nodded. "You may continue your work as usual, but do not cross boundaries. My son is fragile." Anna nodded. "Yes, sir." When she left the room, Michael stayed seated, his hands folded under his chin. Something about that conversation unsettled him. All his life, he had been the man who fixed problems. But this time, he couldn't. He didn't have control. The next few days passed quietly. Anna returned to the garden every morning, always at the same hour. Sometimes Ethan would be at the window, sometimes not, but she never rushed. She cleaned, she hummed, and she blew small bubbles that floated gently in the air. Then one afternoon, while Anna was packing up her cleaning tools, she heard light footsteps behind her. She turned, and there was Ethan, standing near the edge of the garden. The sunlight touched his hair, and his eyes looked calm. Anna froze, afraid to scare him. "Hello," she said softly. He didn't answer, but he took a slow step forward. In his hand, he held a blue crayon. He looked at the soap bucket, then at her, then at the sky. Anna crouched down. "You like bubbles?" she asked gently. He nodded slightly. It was the first real response she had ever seen from him. At that exact moment, Michael came outside, stopping at the doorway. His breath caught. He had never seen Ethan walk toward anyone like that, not even him. Anna didn't notice him watching. She dipped the ring again and blew one more bubble. Ethan's eyes followed it up until it disappeared into the sunlight. He smiled, small, but real. Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, but his voice failed him. That evening, after Anna left, he sat on the garden bench where she had been. He looked at the soap ring she had used, lying beside the bucket. It was small, cheap, almost meaningless, yet it had done more for his son than $1 million of therapy. For the first time in years, Michael felt something he couldn't describe. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't control. It was gratitude mixed with confusion, mixed with shame. Later that night, as he tucked Ethan into bed, the boy reached out and touched his father's sleeve gently. Michael froze. "Do you miss her?" he whispered, almost afraid to say the words. Ethan didn't speak, but his eyes moved toward the small bubble ring lying on the nightstand. He touched it with his finger, then looked back at his father. Michael nodded slowly. "I miss her too," he said quietly. When he left the room, his heart felt heavier, but somehow alive again. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or meetings. He was thinking about a quiet maid and a little boy, and how a simple bubble could hold more meaning than all the noise in his world. And though he didn't know it yet, that small peace he felt would soon turn into the biggest storm his house had ever seen. The next morning, soft sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Johnson estate. The garden glowed after an early rain, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Anna arrived quietly as usual, her shoes damp from the grass. She placed her cleaning bucket near the path, tied her apron, and started to work. Ethan was already by the window, resting his chin on his small hands. His eyes followed her every move. He no longer hid when she came outside. He waited. Anna smiled faintly when she saw him. She didn't speak, but her eyes carried warmth. She lifted the small bubble ring, dipped it gently, and blew. One bubble rose, bright and soft, catching the morning light. Ethan's gaze followed it, his lips moving silently. She blew another, then another, each one floating higher, dancing in the air. The boy's hands moved slightly, reaching out through the glass. Inside his office upstairs, Michael watched again, but this time not through a screen. He stood behind the curtain, silent, eyes fixed on the garden. He didn't understand why this mattered to him so much. Maybe it was because for the first time, his son wasn't still like a statue. For a few minutes, the house was calm. No sounds, no orders, no phones, just soap bubbles and a small boy breathing freely. Anna finished her cleaning and prepared to leave, but when she turned, she saw Ethan standing at the doorway of the garden. He had come down quietly on his own. Her eyes widened slightly. "Hello, Ethan," she said softly. He didn't answer. His little feet moved closer, one slow step at a time. He looked at her bucket, then up at the sky. His fingers made a small circle in the air, as if he wanted her to blow another one. Anna smiled. "Okay," she whispered. She dipped the ring again and blew gently. The bubble floated upward, soft and steady. Ethan's eyes followed it, his face calm. Then, something happened. As the bubble drifted higher, he lifted his hand and whispered a small sound, almost too faint to hear. Anna froze, her heart beating fast. He whispered again, clearer this time. "Sky." The bubble popped in the air, and silence filled the garden. Anna's mouth parted, but she said nothing. She wanted to cry, but she didn't want to scare him. She bent down slowly to his level, her voice quiet and tender. "Yes," she said. "That's right. Sky." Ethan looked at her, eyes bright, and smiled. At that moment, Michael stepped outside, holding a cup of coffee. He hadn't heard the word, but when he saw Anna crouched in front of Ethan, his chest tightened with confusion and jealousy. "What's going on here?" His voice came firm. Ethan flinched and stepped back. The cup slipped from Michael's hand, crashing onto the floor. The sound echoed through the garden. Ethan covered his ears, trembling. Anna moved quickly, kneeling beside the boy. "It's okay," she whispered, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're safe, Ethan. You're safe." Michael stood frozen, guilt flooding his face. He had only meant to speak, not to scare them. He bent down to help, but Anna shook her head slightly. "Let me," she said softly. Ethan clung to her arm, breathing fast. Slowly, she hummed her quiet tune, the same one she always hummed while cleaning. Bit by bit, Ethan's breathing calmed. Michael watched, speechless. No doctor, no expert had ever reached his son like this. But this woman, with nothing but her patience, had just done the impossible. When Ethan finally calmed down, Anna looked up at Michael. "He said a word," she said quietly. Michael blinked. "What?" "Sky," she whispered. "He said sky." For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The sound of that word felt heavier than anything he had ever heard. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I heard it clearly." He looked at his son, still holding the small soap ring. Then, for the first time in a long time, tears filled his eyes. He wiped them quickly, embarrassed. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. Anna stood slowly. "Don't thank me, sir. Thank him. He was ready. I just waited." Her words stayed in his mind long after she left the garden. That night, Michael sat in his office, staring at his reflection in the glass. All these years he had tried to fix silence with money and pressure, yet it was a maid who healed his son with quiet patience. He felt small, almost ashamed. The next morning, before she arrived, he stood outside the garden waiting. When Anna came, she froze. "Sir?" He looked down, his tone calm. "I want to understand how you did it. Tell me what you see when you look at him." Anna hesitated. "I see a boy who listens, even when he doesn't speak. I see peace hiding behind fear." He nodded slowly. "And me?" What do you see when you look at me?" She took a breath. A man who wants to help but doesn't know how to stop fighting everything around him. Her honesty caught him off guard. He let out a soft sigh. "You're braver than most people I know," he said. "I'm just a cleaner, sir," she replied. Michael looked her straight in the eye. Not anymore. But their quiet connection didn't go unnoticed. Later that week, during a company meeting, one of his board members mentioned seeing online photos of the maid and the boy. The family's lawyer warned him that keeping her near Ethan could be seen as risky. "People will talk, Michael," the lawyer said firmly. "She's not trained, not certified. If something goes wrong, they'll blame you." Michael stared at the table, silent. His world of control and rules was closing in again. That evening, when Anna came to work, he met her at the door. His face looked tired. "I think it's best if you take a few days off," he said quietly. Anna's eyes fell. "Did I do something wrong?" He shook his head. "No. You did everything right. That's what scares them." She nodded slowly. "If that's what you want, sir." As she walked away, Ethan ran to the window again, pressing his hands on the glass, waiting for bubbles that never came. His father stood behind him, watching the boy's face fall into silence once more. Michael felt something inside him break, though he didn't yet know how to fix it. The mansion felt colder after Anna left. The laughter that had begun to grow in small, quiet moments was gone again. The housekeepers whispered as they walked through the halls, and the gardeners avoided the back path where Anna used to scrub and blow bubbles. For the first 2 days, Ethan waited by the window every morning. He held his blue crayon in one hand, staring out at the garden that once shimmered with light and bubbles. But when nothing happened, his small shoulders slumped. He stopped eating breakfast, stopped smiling, stopped drawing. Michael noticed the change, and guilt clawed at him. He tried to sit with his son, to talk, but Ethan only stared at the floor, silent and distant. Every time Michael tried to reach for him, the boy moved away. One evening, when Michael returned from a meeting, the head housekeeper handed him a folded paper. "He wrote this, sir," she said softly. Michael unfolded it. In the middle of the page, written in a shaky blue crayon, was one word. Bubble. He felt his chest tighten. His son, who had said his first word days ago, had written another, but it wasn't just a word, it was a cry. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet halls of the mansion, his mind heavy with regret. The cameras in the garden blinked faintly, recording nothing but emptiness. He remembered Anna's words, "You can't fix silence with pressure." He finally understood what she meant. Early the next morning, he got into his car and drove across the city. The roads were quiet, the sky pale gray. When he reached the small apartment complex, he hesitated before knocking. The door opened slowly, and there stood Anna. Her apron was folded, her hair tied back, and her eyes filled with surprise. "Mr. Johnson?" she asked softly. He looked tired, almost lost. "Please, come back," he said. His voice cracked slightly. "He asked for you." Anna froze. "Ethan?" He nodded. "He wrote it. The word bubble. He's not the same without you." She stared at him for a long moment, then looked down at her hands. "I'm just a maid, sir. The people around you won't like me near him." Michael took a step forward. "Then let them leave. I'm done listening to people who don't understand what love looks like." For a moment, silence filled the doorway. Then Anna nodded slowly. "I'll come." The next morning, she arrived quietly, carrying the same small bucket and bubble ring. Ethan saw her from the top of the stairs. His little feet moved fast as he ran down, nearly tripping. When he reached her, he stopped and looked up, his lips trembling. "Hi, Ethan," she whispered gently. He didn't speak, but he lifted his hand, holding out the blue crayon. Michael stood nearby, watching, his throat tight. Anna knelt down, took the crayon, and smiled. "Shall we draw outside?" she asked. Ethan nodded. They went out to the garden together. Anna sat on the grass while Ethan drew circles on the patio stones. The sunlight returned that morning, soft and warm. Michael stood by the doorway, quietly watching them. For the first time in a long time, he didn't need to record anything. He just wanted to be present. But peace never lasts long when power is nearby. 2 weeks later, Michael received a legal notice from his late wife's parents, Charles and Linda Miller. They had filed for emergency custody of Ethan, claiming Michael was allowing an unqualified cleaner to care for the boy. The court date was set for Friday morning. Michael's lawyer warned him, "They have influence, sir. They'll use the maid to make you look reckless." That night, Anna sat in the kitchen, pale and worried. "If they win, he'll lose everything we built," she whispered. Michael looked at her and shook his head. "They won't win. Not this time." Friday morning came heavy with tension. The courtroom was filled with reporters and lawyers. The Millers sat across the aisle, their faces cold and proud. Anna sat quietly beside Michael, her hands shaking. The opposing lawyer spoke first. "Your Honor, the child's welfare is at risk. This woman, an untrained maid, was allowed to act as a therapist. It's negligence." Michael's lawyer responded calmly, "Your Honor, the boy has improved more under her care than under any medical expert. The father's decision was not reckless. It was human." Then the judge, an older woman with kind eyes, looked down at Anna. "Miss Brooks, can you explain what you did differently from the professionals?" Anna swallowed hard. "I didn't do much, ma'am. I just sat with him. I didn't tell him to talk. I just listened." The courtroom went silent. Even the judge seemed moved. Then, as the lawyers continued arguing, Ethan slipped free from his nanny and walked forward. His small shoes echoed on the marble floor. Everyone turned. He stopped in front of the judge, holding his blue crayon. The judge leaned down gently. "Hello, Ethan. Do you want to say something?" The boy looked around the room, then at Anna. His lips moved, and he whispered softly, "Bubbles." Gasps filled the room. Michael closed his eyes, tears slipping down his face. Anna covered her mouth, trying not to cry. The judge smiled warmly. "That's all I needed to hear," she said. "Case dismissed. Custody stays with the father." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as the family walked down the steps. Michael shielded Ethan from the noise, while Anna held his hand. Reporters shouted questions, but no one answered. The truth didn't need words anymore. Weeks later, life at the mansion changed completely. Michael removed all the cameras. The garden, once cold and empty, became a place of laughter again. Anna no longer wore her cleaning uniform. She wore simple dresses and worked with children who came to visit. Together, they opened the Haven, a small program in the east wing of the estate for children, like Ethan kids, who needed patience, not pressure. One sunny afternoon, Ethan stood in the garden, holding his old bubble ring. Michael and Anna stood behind him, watching. The boy dipped the ring gently, blew, and released one perfect bubble into the air. "That one's for Mom," he said softly. Anna felt tears warm her eyes. Michael reached for her hand. The bubble floated high into the bright blue sky, carrying silence, love, and peace. The three of them stood there, side by side, not master and servant, not billionaire and maid, but a family rebuilt by something the world could never buy. Kindness that stayed. And as the last bubble drifted away, the truth became clear. Home was never the mansion, or the money, or the name. It was the people who stayed when everything else went quiet. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that love does not need titles, money, or power. It only needs patience, kindness, and a heart that truly listens. Anna did not heal Ethan with wealth or fancy words. She healed him with time, care, and gentleness. She taught us that silence can speak, and that sometimes the smallest act, like blowing a bubble, can change a life forever. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what you learned from it. We always love to read your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people can experience the message of love and hope it carries. And if you want more emotional and life-changing stories like this, comment "more stories" below, and you will be the first to get the next one. Because here, every story reminds us that no act of kindness is ever too small, and no voice, no matter how quiet, should ever go unheard.